Dear David, you are coming to give an all-day presentation in Prague this September. It might be your first time at the past Eastern Communist bloc. Your first book, Only Infinite Love is the Truth, Everything Else is Illusion, is about to be published at the end of August. What are your feelings about that?
Well, I'm delighted about the book going into your language and also coming across to speak, because it's another indication of how far the understanding is now getting across the world that the world and our lives are very different to what we thought they were before. We look at governments and various other political organizations, and we think that they are running our lives, and they are doing it because we have elected them. But the truth is that all the countries are controlled by the same global network of a group of interbreeding families that go back to the ancient world and have been embarked on a process of the constant centralization of power in the world, century after century after century, where we've moved from a tribal situation where people in the tribe decided what happened in the tribe. Then the tribes were brought together, lots of tribes under things called nations. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes, and now we're into this, very much in Europe, into this next stage, which is bringing the nations together and putting them into this European Union fascist dictatorship, because that's what it is, where a few people, actually not even elected politicians but bureaucrats appointed, are dictating to all the nations of Europe. So you see the constant incessant centralization of power, and this is important because if the few are going to control the many more and more powerfully, they have to keep centralizing decision making so that fewer and fewer people are making the decisions and dictating to the lives of more and more people. And you know, when I started out on this journey consciously 20 years ago, if you talked about this, then people just basically laughed at you. Never mind going to countries all over the world like the Czech Republic now. It just didn't happen. But because world events in recent times have shown people more and more obviously that this centralized global police state is real, and they're now seeing its influences in their lives and on the television news, the interest has just exploded. So coming to a new country like the Czech Republic is very, very, very encouraging to me, and I'm really looking forward to coming, because I've never been there before.
Prague is historically mystical and esoteric city and the important gate. Have you got any recent information and data of this kind about Prague and the territory of Czech Republic? And will you have the time to see city?
Well, I hope I'll have the time to see the city, but you know, whenever I go anywhere in the world to speak, my prime focus is making sure that I do the best job I can for the people that come. So I do a lot of preparation. In terms of the Czech Republic, in the weeks before I come, I'll be doing a lot of research about the country and that background and how it fits into the global picture. But the way all countries operate is that there is a global network, a global web of secret societies and particular families, and they act like a transnational corporation. Transnational corporation has a headquarters, and in each country it has its subsidiary companies who all operate in line with the dictated agenda and policy of the center. Well, this network has a center, and it's in Europe, places like London and Paris and Berlin, etc., Switzerland. And in each country, and the Czech Republic will be no different, there is a network of secret societies that are like a subsidiary company to that center, that spider in the web that I talk about. And so those ruling major business political families in the Czech Republic will be working through the Czech Republic's secret society network to impose on the Czech people the global policy which is being imposed by other similar networks in all the other countries. So, you know, over the last 20 years I've been to 50 countries researching this, and again and again I see what I call the blueprint, where the same structure exists in every country to impose the same global agenda on every country. Sometimes even the laws are worded the same, never mind justified by the same excuses. So the Czech Republic will be, because every other country is, a subsidiary kind of company of the global network. And I know now, when I come to the Czech Republic, I'll find exactly the same blueprint I find everywhere else, because I find them everywhere. There's no example where I've not found it.
Well, Prague and Czech leaders play a key role in the global conspiracy as well. It was so obvious in called Velvet Revolution at 1989. For instance, the actions of adored anti-communist leader Václav Havel, or Affair Ministry Karl von Schwarzenberg should be the descender of mythic Dracula. But the Czechs actually believe in him so much. It's funny, isn't it? Do you agree that the highest light and deepest darkness still work together at one place?
Well, I think what you call the highest light and the deepest darkness exist together in every place. And the more powerful energetically a place is, the more the two are attracted to it, because the manipulators, what you call the dark level of people and whatever, they're attracted to the lower frequencies of this power center, these power centers that exist all over the world, and other people are attracted to the higher level of it, but it still pulls the same people into the same location. In terms of the Velvet Revolution, the so-called color revolutions and velvet revolutions, whether it be the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and the Rose Revolution in Georgia, they all take the same pattern, and it's orchestrated by a network involving the American financier and the major financier of Barack Obama, a man called George Soros. And he has a series of trusts and other groupings that form a network, and he has got with the rest of the cabal this, again, blueprint for bringing about people's revolutions. And what you do is you manipulate the people to protest against a regime you want to remove, and the people then bring an end to that regime, and they think that people power has ruled, people's power has come out on top. But what happens is, at the end of all of them, is the Soros guy, the cabal guy, ends up in power. And this has happened all over the place. That guy, what's his name, Saakashvili in Georgia, he was or is a front man for the Soros network, and another man called Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is the key mentor over decades of Barack Obama. And Brzezinski was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, and he has openly admitted in a Paris magazine that when he was national security advisor towards the end of the 70s, he funded and trained, quote, freedom fighters in Afghanistan to cause trouble and dissent and violence for the government in Kabul at the time, which was controlled by the Soviet Union. And what he says openly now is that it was done to try to entice the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan, as they did eventually, to protect their government from the freedom fighters that Brzezinski had trained and funded. What happened then is that during that Russian occupation or Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, 1 million Afghans died. But Brzezinski said he did it because he wanted to give the Soviet Union, quote, their Vietnam, and destroy another superpower. However, what happened was these freedom fighters then became known as the Mujahideen, who then became known as the Taliban, and now we've got Barack Obama sending tens of thousands more troops into Afghanistan to, quote, fight the Taliban, which were in effect created by his mentor, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Brzezinski and Soros have worked together on these color revolutions, etc., like the Velvet Revolution, in Eastern Europe. It's all a scam. And you know, people say, well, we've got to vote now. Well, there's two forms of control. There's a control that you can see, communism, fascism, and although people are controlled that way, at least they know where they stand. They're in a controlled situation and they can basically see the controllers. The greatest form of enslavement is an enslavement that you cannot see. It's like a prison without the bars. If you've got in a prison, you've got bars around you, you know you've got a situation you need to get out of. If you can't see the bars, you'll just sit there forever in the prison and do nothing about it, because people do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. And what's happened with these revolutions in Eastern Europe is that they have exchanged a dictatorship and a tyranny that they can see for a dictatorship and a tyranny that masquerades as freedom and democracy. And what people need to realize is that the same shadow people that were behind the communist regimes are also behind the free and democratic regimes. The same people are still running the show. It's like, for instance, a great example, a real prime example is South Africa. During apartheid, a cabal of families around the Oppenheimer family, who control the diamonds and the gold and everything in South Africa, and are answerable to the Rothschilds, the House of Rothschild, they demonstrably controlled apartheid South Africa. And then Mandela comes out of prison. They make him president. He was a totally puppet president because the same Oppenheimer Rothschild family network continues to control South Africa to this day. But because the South Africans now can line up in great long lines once every 4 or 5 years and vote for a one-party state called the African National Congress, all you've got to do to be president of South Africa is to be voted head of the African National Congress, and you're president, because it's a one-party state. But they're told, we're free now under apartheid, we couldn't vote, now we can. Same people control. The difference is, during apartheid they could see the tyranny, and therefore they rebelled against it. Now, oh no, there's a black man in the presidency, and it's a black government, so yeah, we're free now. No. Tyranny is not the color of your skin. It's not the nature of your genetics. It's the state of your mind. And tyranny can manifest through any genetic type you could speak of. So Czechoslovakia and all these countries have, or the Czech Republic has, have been subjected to this recurring blueprint of manipulation that you find.
Our recent President Václav Klaus showed us that he has got enough courage to oppose the fascist agenda plan of signing Lisbon Treaty, and many people honoring him for that. Is it another trick of global lead, or are there also awakened leaders who just broke suddenly and stopped in the direction for total enslavement?
I've got a great deal of respect for the stance that Mr. Klaus took in many areas. He was one, if not the only, world leader, certainly one of a very small number, who actually had the wisdom and the courage to stand up against the lie of human pollution-caused global warming. I mean, you know, you look at the scientific evidence and you look at the nature of all the data, and a 10-year-old could see that a insignificant greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide could not possibly change the climate in the way that's being described. And for a long time now, must be 6 months, Al Gore has just gone AWOL, absent without leave. He's just kind of disappeared because of the stuff that's coming out now. This is why Gore will not debate with anybody about his claims for this global warming catastrophe. But the politicians, you know, sheep, just go along with it, either because they're part of the manipulation and they know it's not true, or to a very large extent they're just uninformed. Well, the scientists say, so it must be. Well, actually, enormous amounts of scientists of cutting edge in their discipline say it's not true. It's the song sheet scientists who say it is true, or just singing from a song sheet that they've been given. And I had great respect for Mr. Klaus to come out and say what he did in the face of a lot of abuse that he got from idiots and manipulators as a result. I also have had tremendous respect for his stance on the Lisbon Treaty. Mr. Klaus obviously understands that the European Union is a fascist communist, because fascist communism, they're just different masks on the same face, fascist communist dictatorship. I've shown in great detail in my books and my research over the years that the European Union that we have now, which is a centralized bureaucratic tyranny, totally the same as the Politburo in the communist Soviet Union, was planned to be like this from the moment the European Economic Community, the Common Market it was called then, and long before, was actually even suggested. But there is a technique that I call in my books the totalitarian tiptoe, and it works like this. If you went, or let me put it this way first. You're standing at A, and you know that you want to take the world or Europe to B, totally different situation. But you know that if you go from A to no, not B, Z rather, you go from A to Z, and you know you're going to Z. But if you go from A to Z in one great jump, then the change is so fantastic that people go, what's going on? So if suddenly one day they said, okay, no more nation states, we're bringing an end to them tomorrow, and then we're going to bring in this European Union centralized dictatorship to all the countries of Europe. People will go, what? So you don't do it like that. You use the totalitarian tiptoe. You go from A to B to D to E. You go as fast as you can, but not so fast that you alert people to actually where this is leading. And by the time they realize where it's leading, which is where we are, which is centralized dictatorship of the whole of Europe, it's perceived to be too late to do anything about it. And the Lisbon Treaty was possibly the biggest stepping stone in this tiptoe of the European Union, of all of them. And as a result of it, some people who actually have some intelligence, but many, many more people with the passage of the months and years to come, will realize that that treaty was basically a contract to bring in fascism, communism, fascism, to the whole of Europe. And virtually one major politician stood up to that and tried to stop it coming in by preventing the signing of it by the Czech Republic. And that was Mr. Klaus. And so a round of applause to him for that. But in the end, of course, it went through. And now what we're seeing is exactly what was predicted before. We're seeing the centralization of power in Europe on a level never seen before, where we're having European arrest warrants, where police, it's now proposed, from countries all over Europe can go into any other country and arrest people. They can have them extradited very easily. They're talking about a European police force, a European army, and basically the powers of the nation state are being eroded to the point where they're irrelevant. You know, in Britain now, I'm sure it's getting like that in the Czech Republic, something like 75% of laws that pass through the British Parliament originate in Europe, in the European Union. And this whole idea that we have national politicians making decisions about nation states, it's all a farce, it's all a front, it's all an illusion. Europe is dictating the engine driving the change from a state of freedom and civil rights to one of centralized tyranny. And the fact that Mr. Klaus was just about the only politician to stand up to that is good for him, but it's a bloody disgrace for the rest of them all over Europe, not least in this country.
You've done a lot, not only for yourself, but for the freedom of others too. Tell us something, please. What does it mean for you to make a job in so wonderful way? Are there any moments when you are afraid?
No, I wouldn't say that I'm afraid. I'm passionate. I'm determined. And you know, when you have a philosophy on life that I have, and I back it up with a lot of detailed evidence in my books, that we are infinite eternal consciousness having an experience in this frequency range we call a reality, and that David Icke or Ethel Jones or Charlie Smith is just an experience that my consciousness is having. It's not me, it's an experience I'm having, which is why when people have near-death experiences, they have the experience of leaving the body, but they're still totally in their awareness, in fact far more in their awareness than they are in the body. And people say, well, how can they see, how can they perceive, how can they think without the body? Well, because that's their natural state. So where I'm going with this is this: the worst thing that can happen to me doing what I'm doing is that someone kills me. What that means is my infinite consciousness leaves this vehicle, you know, just like a spaceman gets out of the spacesuit. So I think I can deal with that, no problem. So the worst thing that can happen is someone kills me, and I have no problem with that. The problem I have with that only is this: they're not going to do it before I've done what I've come to do. Simple as that. End of story. We have far more power than we think we have, and in fact the whole foundation of the conspiracy to enslave humanity is to constantly persuade, encourage, manipulate humanity to think it has no power, to think it's just little me, I've got no power, Joe Public, what can I do? Well, actually we can change anything we like, because we're amazing expressions of the one consciousness that in all its many and various infinite forms is what we all are. So I don't fear these people. I think they're pathetic. I think they are frightened in so many ways, and terrified and immensely insecure, because secure people do not want power over others. Insecure people want power over others. Secure people do not want to control events all the time. They're quite happy to flow with the way the life goes. These people are so insecure for many and various reasons, which would take a lot of time to explain, and therefore they want to control everything. When if you take the football match analogy, they are incredibly uncomfortable going to a football match and not knowing what the result's going to be before the game starts. You know, that who's going to win, or is it going that way? They can't stand that. What they have to know, because of their extraordinary levels of insecurity, is what the score's going to be before the game starts. Now, how do you do that? You can't do it by controlling one side, because you influence the game, but you don't decide the game, because there's an unknown force which is the other side. And so they want to control both sides. So taking that into our everyday life, what they do is they'll create groups that are for something that they want, and they'll create groups that are against something or appear to be against something that they want. And now they've controlled both sides. Everyone has an argument, a debate, a protest, and people think, oh, it's a free world, free country, because look, there's protest and there's argument going on and discussion, yeah. But they know what the blooming outcome's going to be. The side that is pressing for what they want is the one that's going to prevail. So this is how it works. And what they don't understand, therefore, because they do not have the capacity for that because of their own state of being, they do not understand or know how to handle people who are not in fear either of them or death or any of it. They can't handle that because they can't understand it, because that's not where they're at. And so it's interesting that in some of their writings, some of the documents that have come to light, they talk about the great danger to their plan of what they call maverick people. People who are not frightened of them, people who are not programmed by the system to think and see the world the way the system wants them to. They are very dangerous to this tyranny, and we need more of them. And I'm going to go on being a maverick until I've done what I've come to do, and they are not going to reduce that time 1 second, because I'm in control of my reality and my life, not them.
That's beautiful, yeah. Well, you've launched a worldwide tour this year and next year, where Prague is honored by your visit. Please tell us what is so attractive for the people that come in huge numbers to see your presentations around the world. What may be so important for them?
One of the things that people have said to me over the years is that they love to come, because there's a fantastic amount of information. I mean, you know, I'm speaking for 8 hours at these events across a great swathe of different subjects, which on the face of it have no connection, but the longer the talk goes on, the more the connections can be seen, and you can see a dramatically different picture of the world to the one that we're given normally. But another thing, like I was saying, that people have said to me over the years is it's just wonderful to hear someone saying what we think. Because you see, even today, although there is a major awakening is underway. I mean, I can see the difference from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was doing this, to the situation now in terms of interest and awareness. There is tremendous awakening going on, and a lot of it that people don't see. It's going on in people's private, you know, everyday lives, and people are not aware of it, but it is going on. But even today, if they said what they felt about the world and reality and all the rest of it, they would still face, from a lot of people, friends, family, people at work, ridicule and dismissal from these programmed minds that are still being told what to think by the system. So when people come to my events, they are overwhelmingly among people who have come to similar conclusions to them, to hear information that hopefully, because the talks move on all the time, it introduces even more information and newer information than they're aware of up to that point. But they're among like minds, and people get a tremendous boost. It's like, you know, the old French resistance in the war or something. You know, you had to keep quiet when you were out in society and doing your everyday job, but when you were among other people in the resistance, you could actually talk freely without fear of the reaction or fear of consequences. And it's similar at my events. You know, someone once, I was speaking in England at a place called Sheffield, and I was just about to go out to start, and someone looked through the curtains at the audience, and there was every walk of life you could think of, every age group you could think of, from 16 to kind of 70, 80. People with money, people not with money, people from this area of society, that area of society. And someone looking at, they said, what is the thing that connects all these people? And I said, an open mind. An open mind. Yeah. And it's wonderful for me to stand in front of the audiences of open-minded people, because by the end of the day, there's an energy in the room.
Yeah.
There's an energy in the room as all these open minds lock together, and it is absolutely fantastic. And I never tire of experiencing it. And it will be great to come to the Czech Republic and for the first time and do it there. I'm looking forward to it greatly.
Yeah, he's looking forward to it.
What do you prefer for your own work? Books, lectures, or something another?
Well, I like them all, really. I mean, when I start my books, and what happens is that I go about my other business, the website, the talks, the newsletters, the radio and television interviews that I do all the time. And then there comes a point where just something tells me, time to write another book. And the most intimidating part of writing the book is when you sit down on day one in front of a blank computer screen, nothing, not a word,
Yeah.
and you start. Because the books, I mean, my new book has just come out in English, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. It's 355,000 words.
Oh.
And I don't know, 600 and odd pages, and it's just a massive work. And back in March of 2009, I sat in front of a blank computer screen, and by January of the following year, with a great gap in between of traveling when I didn't do anything, but about 9 months later, 355,000 words were looking at me.
Wow.
And once you get to a certain point in writing the book where you've basically laid the canvas down, I then love weaving the whole thing together and weaving information into what I've already written. I love that part. And then off it goes, and you know, when it comes out, you know, it's great and all the rest of it, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to sit down now, oh, I've written a book, look, I've written a book. Okay, I've written a book, okay? Other people are circulating that. Boom, off we go. And so doing the talks is brilliant because you're interacting with people directly. And, you know, I do a tremendous amount of interviews because, you know, you can talk to a radio station in America and you can talk to 100, 200,000 people, maybe a lot more sometimes, in one go from my, you know, my flat on the phone. And it's interesting that you keep doing this, and you keep doing this, and you keep doing this, you keep doing this year after year after year, and then suddenly you start to get the feedback of just how many people around the world this information has reached, and that is such a rush that drives you on when you realize actually it is making a difference, and never more so than today. You know, we're on the brink of a global revolution, not of violence, not of protest, but of people ceasing to be the unquestioning, acquiescent slaves that we've been up to this point, and starting to stop cooperating with a system that absolutely depends for its very existence on that cooperation. And that's this is a time, a cusp of change when this tyranny is going to fall, and it won't be tomorrow, and for the next few years it's going to seem that nothing's going to stop it. It's going to seem that it's just going to bring it all in and no one's going to stop it, and then suddenly it's going to collapse, and there's reasons for this, energetic reasons, but you know, our children and grandchildren are not going to live in a tyranny, but we're going to live in a increasingly expanding tyranny for the next few years. But the revolution's here, and the structure that holds it together is coming down, and that structure is the human race acquiescing to it. When that is removed, when we cease to be subservient to the few and we refuse to be dictated to in terms of what we do, what we think, all the rest of it, then the very cement, the glue that holds this structure of power and suppression together falls. Because it's interesting, when you look at a pyramid, people think the power at the pyramid is at the top. but the top, the little bit, the capstone at the top of the pyramid is only up there because the rest of the pyramid's holding it up there. And that's what we're doing as a human race. The vast majority of people in this world do not want the violence, the conflict, the poverty, the hunger, the manipulation of our everyday lives, increasingly down to fine detail. They don't want that. So why do we have it? How many people want a war? How many people do you meet that actually want a war? Virtually nobody. I don't think I've ever met anybody that wanted a war that was outside the system's hierarchy. And then the question comes, so why do we have them? We have them because the few decide that they're going to have them, and then members of the majority who have not made that decision, they then go and fight them wearing uniforms and carrying weapons. And in the other country, the hierarchy there decides they're going to have a war too with these people, and they get their people from the masses in uniform to go and fight these people from the masses. Now the people that on both sides that have declared the war or whatever, they're not hearing a gun fired in anger. They're drinking cocktails in Washington and Downing Street. But they get the people to fight each other. And if you took these people, if you took the people in the British Army and the American forces, well, most of them anyway, because some of them are so seriously programmed, they have no ability for free thought at all. But then you take some of these people, they're fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you put them together in a room and they chat away, they probably get on great. But they never do that. They're never allowed to sit and talk to each other about their lives and their feelings and all the rest of it. No. It's you in uniform, that guy in the distance in uniform or whatever it is, he's your enemy. And the other guy over there is telling that person same about this person. And that's how it goes on. The few can control the many because the many allow it. And we're entering a period where I'm absolutely certain that the few, not too many years from now, are no longer going to allow it. Great time to be alive.
Sorry for this question, but I cannot help myself. Could you tell us something more about the world you have come from on the earth? Actually, do you think that people come from the various worlds, especially at this unique time?
Well, this reality is a very, very interesting place to experience for this reason. We're all the same consciousness, but different states of being, different states of awareness within that one consciousness vibrate to different frequencies. So if you are in a suppressed state of awareness and you are in a very expanded state of awareness, at the level of disembodied consciousness, energy if you like, those two frequencies couldn't interact with each other. It's like a radio station, Radio Prague or something, being on this wavelength and another radio station being on this wavelength. They'll share the same space, but they'll never meet. These vehicles, these holographic computer systems we call the human body, they are resonating within this frequency. So consciousness of an expanded state can experience this awareness, this reality through the physical body, just as an expression of consciousness in a suppressed, limited state can also experience this reality through that same body, another body, because the bodies are resonating within the frequency range of this reality, and therefore anyone that becomes embodied in those computer systems I call the human body, they can experience this reality, which means that here is a world in which people with advanced awareness and people with suppressed awareness can sit in the same bar and have a chat. They can interact. So it's a wonderful kind of cocktail of infinite different levels of awareness and perceptions that can interact here where they can't in a disembodied state because they're on different frequencies. And so it makes it an incredibly interesting place to experience, and of course potentially a very challenging one because of all the different influences there are. But it's an incredible place to see all expressions of life, and especially now when this reality is going through the most monumental transformation for the better.
And would you be a little bit specific? Like, do you believe that we are like coming from the different star systems?
Well, in the end, in our disembodied consciousness state, we are just awareness. But that awareness can experience other, if you like, body vehicles that we would call extraterrestrials, that have lives on other planets, in other dimensions of reality, other frequencies, in other star systems, and all the rest of it. So you could say that you know, consciousness that has experienced, I don't know, Orion or Sirius or something, then comes here and experiences this, and people might talk about, oh, you know, I come from another star system, I come from Sirius, or I come from Orion or Andromeda or somewhere, but and that may be kind of true in the sense that I'm talking about, but in the end, what we call Andromeda and Sirius and Orion and the Earth, these are all just parts of this holographic computer system, which is a way that we can experience many different experiences, and we are consciousness, awareness in the end, all of us. It's just that some people are more open to the greater consciousness, i.e. they have expanded perception and awareness of self and reality, and others are more closed. And the control system that I've been exposing this past 20 years, its foundation techniques are all based on closing people's sense of awareness. So they see everything in terms of limitation. I can't, I have no power. And there are people now in this reality, and coming into this reality more and more as what we call children, who have that expanded awareness to offer another explanation for life and everything to those that are in that state. So it's just an incredible time, and people say, oh, I'm boring, it's boring, life's so boring. Well, crikey, you know, this is just an amazing time in an amazing place, and we need to encompass it and turn it into an adventure, because that's what it is.
Of course, I don't want to know much in detail, but how do you protect yourself? I mean both physically and energetically.
I don't. Because people have said to me many times, why don't you have bodyguards, or do you have bodyguards? And I say, well, absolutely bloody not. Because what is a bodyguard? A bodyguard is a physical expression of a mental state, and that mental state is, I accept that something could happen to me, I accept that I could be killed, or this could happen to me, or that could happen to me, therefore I need protection. This guy in a dark suit and glasses. I don't accept that, because once you accept into your sense of reality that things could happen to you, then they're far, far more likely to happen, because you are creating the energetic mental state in which they can manifest. I don't accept that that can happen to me, and if it can't happen to me, I don't need bloody bodyguards, thank you very much. In terms of energy and protecting yourself from manipulation of energy, and there is a lot in that, you know, there's a lot of people manipulated by being energetically targeted, electromagnetically targeted in many and various ways to destabilize the health of the body and the mind and emotions and everything. And I've experienced that over the years. But if I keep my heart open and I go on doing what I know to be right, as opposed to what I think is right for me in the moment, but what is the right thing to do in this time. Okay, this might have unpleasant consequences for me, but it's the right thing to do. If you do that, all these mental and emotional states are manifestations of vibrational states. The more fear you're in, the slower your energy vibrates, so it becomes denser. And when you keep your mind open, you keep your heart open, and you do what you know to be right, that manifests as a vibrational state, quite a high vibrational state, quick. Now, if I'm vibrating faster because of that, and I'm not saying me, I'm saying anybody, than the control system, which is based on slow density, which is why they're trying to pull humanity all the time into fear and stress and worry and depression, because that pulls you into their density. But if I'm vibrating quickly, or anyone is, because of their state of being, then the control system cannot energetically, vibrationally connect to me. If it cannot connect vibrationally, it cannot connect physically, because the physical is just an expression of the vibrational, the information. So I'm not saying a lot of people go through this energetic protection and my aura and all that stuff, and good luck to them. Yeah, everyone makes a choice. Good luck to them. I respect it. But if you in any way become obsessed with protection, what you're saying is, I accept something can happen to me. In which case you're creating an energetic environment in which it could well happen to you. I don't accept that. So I don't protect myself. Why? Because I don't need protecting.
Wow, it's incredible. So you're virtually like invisible for them.
Well, they can see me, but vibrationally invisible, in the sense that they can't lock in. If they can't lock into you vibrationally, they can't lock into you physically.
Wow.
I remember a great friend of mine, Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, who's in his 80s now. The man's extraordinary, an incredible library of knowledge of African history and esoterics and all the rest of it. And he did some throwing the bones, as they say, in Africa, but it's like tarot cards or rune stones, that sort of stuff, which he's very skilled in. And he did it for me once when I was with him. I'm going to see him again soon. And he said, they've tried to kill you many times. He said, but they can't do it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But I realized why they can't do it. Because if they can't get to me energetically, they can't get to me physically. They can't do it.
Wow.
And it's the same with anybody that reaches a certain vibrational state. They can't.
That's amazing. Thank you. So I have another question.
David, those who know you can really feel that you represent the consciousness for the new era of living on this planet and beyond. You get enormous information and insights of possible new architecture for years to come. Won't you feel to form international teams to start creating new society?
Well, I'm not an organization person. Organizations form where of not so much organizations as organization is what we need. And there's different ways of organizing. You can sit round a table and take minutes and discuss your next move and all the rest of it, but that's working with mind, and mind is a very low level of awareness and consciousness. Or you can just follow your intuitive knowing, and when you do that, the connections are made through synchronistic, quote, coincidence. Things just fall into place because like people with like intent gravitate to each other. What's that line we have? Birds of a feather flock together. Well, vibrationally, that's true. And what's happening now as people go through this vibrational transformation is they're finding that Their old life is disappearing, their old friends, acquaintances, even partners, etc. are going out of their lives, and new people are coming in. What's happening is they've gone to a new vibrational state, so they're no longer syncing with those that are in the old vibrational state they were in, which attracted to them before, and other people come into their lives that match the new vibrational state they've gone into. And this comes by changing your attitude, opening your mind, opening your heart, and all that stuff. And that, for me, is the most powerful form of organization. And once we come together, if we keep following our intuition and don't let mind dominate our perception, then all that's necessary to be done will just fall into place. The right people will come together, the right people will decide what they're going to do once they come together, and organization in various ways will manifest as a result of that. But for me, the most important thing that people can do in the if you like, the physical world, is to stop cooperating with the system, because 7 billion people can only be controlled by, literally, compared with 7 billion, a handful. If the 7 billion give their power away, give their right to free thought away, give their right to deciding their own lives and destiny away, and acquiesce to the laws and impositions of the few. And it's not that we need to fight, we don't. What's the use? What do you get if you fight? You have a battle. You know, what do you do if you fight for peace? How can you fight for peace? You can't fight for peace, you peace for peace. So fighting is, you know, ridiculous. You know, okay, now we've got two people fighting, other worlds moved on. We need to just calmly, but with total determination, cease to acquiesce en masse with a system of control. Because if we do that, the system cannot cope. Because the system has so few people in it that are knowingly doing this, they need vast chunks of the rest of the population who are not knowingly doing it to administer the control system for them, and they need then vastly greater numbers to acquiesce to the control system that they've formed. If these two groups, those within the control system who are administering it in uniforms and dark suits, but in up to this point non-awareness that that's what they're doing, if they cease to cooperate, oh, I've got picked up by a thorn here, and the people being dictated to cease to cooperate with it, then all that's left are the few at the top who are dictating the system at the moment for other peoples to impose. And at that point, they've got no power whatsoever. Like I say, the power at the pyramid is at the bottom, not the top. The capstone's up there because the rest of the pyramid's holding it up there. When we cease to do that, and there are signs now, it's just starting to awaken and gather, then that comes crashing down, and that's what's going to happen. Not tomorrow, but it's going to happen.
Please, can you briefly describe your term of truth vibrations? Is it something to do with God?
The way I see this and describe this in my books and talks is that everything in all existence is one infinite consciousness, and at its core it is stillness and silence, because it is latent all possibility. And people say, if you said, can you hear anything? No, nothing, it's silence. But actually, that silence contains everything. Contains all possibility, everything. The manifest world of frequencies and dimensions like this one are some possibility within all possibility made manifest. So for instance, we've got silence, which is the everything, all possibility. And then I start talking, and as I start talking, I have pulled one possibility out of all possibility and made it manifest. In the same way, this world becomes manifest out of all possibility. And The way it manifests is, I would suggest, this reality is based on a vibrational frequency which carries information or triggers information. I'm saying in my latest book, and I'll say this in the Czech Republic in Prague, that they've now discovered a massive black hole at the center of this galaxy, and the increasing feeling is there's a black hole at the center of every galaxy. Makes total sense in terms of what I'm talking about. These black holes vibrate a base frequency into this reality, and this frequency triggers information of a certain kind that syncs with this frequency to be released by the suns, in this case our sun, in the form of photon energy. The human body computer, this photon energy is the wireless internet in cosmic terms that I'm talking about. The human body computer then decodes this photon information from the vibrational into the electrical, into the digital and holographic, which only exists in our heads. Although it seems to be out here, it only exists in our heads. Just like you get a computer and you tune it to the wireless internet, it will manifest a collective reality on the screen. Well, this is our screen. Now this frequency doesn't just stay the same. It goes through a cycle. The vibration changes and changes and changes and changes and goes through different cycles and then comes back to the start again. Now as we decode that information from the vibrational, we create a holographic representation of it, and as this vibration changes, we appear in the decoded reality, the holographic world we're experiencing here. We appear to be moving from past through present to future. We appear to be moving through time, but in fact this frequency is vibrating in what people call the now, within no time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just the now. But when we decode it, because of the sequence of events that it goes through and the sequence of epochs that it goes through as the vibration changes, because every time the vibration changes, different information is elicited, different levels of information is emitted by the sun, and we're decoding this. And as we decode the new information, the world changes as it moves through the cycle. Now, the truth vibrations, as I call them, which is a much higher vibrational state, which I used as the name for my first book when I started to awaken to this 20 years ago. I was told that a vibrational change was coming that was going to transform the world from what we see, suppression, control, limitation, to a world of extraordinary expansion and awareness, in which control systems would simply not be able to manifest because the consciousness wouldn't be there to manifest them, low vibrational consciousness. And in 1990, when I learned this and used the name the truth vibrations for them, there was no sign whatsoever of this. The other thing I was told is that these truth vibrations were going to bring to the surface, where we could see it, all that had been hidden before. Again, 20 years ago, absolutely no sign of it. Now, look at it. Just think what we know now about the world and reality that we didn't know 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. It's happening. And so we're at this cusp where the old energetic epoch, what they call in Asia, these different epochs, they call them in Asia yugas. And all these different ancient cultures, including the Mayans, which have of course been connected to 2012 and all that stuff, in Central America, they talk about the circular nature of time. Well, this is the circular nature of time, what I call the time loop, is created by what I've just been talking about. And we're now at the cusp where one energetic epoch of suppression and control, and which manifests as the control system, is now being replaced and you know, more and more and more this is coming in. Still, the control system energy is the dominant one as we speak, but it's losing its power all the time. And what we're seeing with the apparently more control coming in is the last desperate attempt to keep the lid on this control, as the energetic state on which it's based is basically disappearing. It's like the cornered rat is what we're seeing, basically. And as this new epoch energy comes in, the truth vibrations as I call it, when people tune into this, and more people are, then their minds are expanding, their awareness and consciousness is expanding, and they're starting to see themselves in the world in a completely different way. Where on the other side, you've got others who are still in a low vibrational state, and therefore they are tuned into the old low vibrational energetic epoch, and they're becoming more and more uncomfortable and more close-minded, because they're connected to this energy that is in that state. But that energy is now being replaced, and people that are connected to that old energy of suppression, the low vibrational energy, you know, they're going to have some problems in the next few years, because the energy information source, awareness perception source to which they're connected is just dying out. It's moving out. How that will manifest, I don't know, but they're going to have problems, as you would in that state. It's like being tuned to a radio station that's increasingly getting quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter, until there is no radio station and a new radio station is taken over, which is the truth vibrations. And the children alive today, the young children alive today, even some of the teenage kids alive today, they are going to live, before they leave this reality, and they'll live much longer lives because of the nature of the energy that we're going into now, and the awareness we're going into now. They are going to live in a very, very different world to the one that we do, and a very much nicer, more pleasant, more loving world than we do. And that's the legacy that we're leaving. And I want to be on another dimension in a non-bodied state when I leave this body, and I want to look down and say, I'm proud of what's been achieved here. And I think we will. I have no doubt that we will. But the challenges in the next few years, as the cornered rat tries to hold on to its power, going to be very challenging indeed.
Yeah, as you know, now entire world speaks about this significant year 2012, and we could see that from the actually mainstream media. They try to some kind of like threaten us, So can you comment a little bit this year? Is it like really going to be bad? Or?
I don't see 2012 like the classic 2012 belief system sees it. I think the real significance of 2012 is it's not 2011, but it's not 2013 either. So as the truth vibrations increase their dominance over the dying epoch, each year that passes is going to be more and more significant in terms of the impact that has on human awareness, human life, etc. I think there'll be a lot of manipulation in 2012 to try to create a atmosphere among people of fear and trepidation and all that stuff. All the end of the world and all this business that you see. And they might even manipulate some events to give us reason to think that it's true. Who knows? But 2013 is more significant than 2012. 2014 is more significant than 2013. That's the way I see it. But by 2012, we're talking in 2010 now. By 2012, these true vibrations will have moved on in our perception of time another 2 years, and their impact will be more and more obvious. So in 2012 will be significantly different to where we are now, but 2013, 14, 15 will be even more significant. Because and eventually there comes a tipping point when the truth vibrations become the dominant information source, perception source, and that's when the control system will fall.
Okay, so I have a final question for you. So David, is there any hope for humanity to live once again in peace, love and freedom?
It's our destiny. It's our destiny for those that are willing to open their minds to all possibility, to not have them closed by preconceived ideas and rigid, unyielding religious, political, scientific beliefs, cultural beliefs. Those people that can do that, their destiny is to have all of those things. But we have to make a decision that we're going to go down that road, because I've used this analogy many times, but I think it's very appropriate. We're at not just a fork in the road, we're on a fork in the river. And what we can do is we can stand there rigidly saying, I ain't moving, as the river starts to move faster and faster and faster, the vibration increases. In which case we're going to expend more and more energy just to stand still and hold the status quo. And that's going to, those people that decide to do that, and the control system will be among them and those behind it, they're going to have some big challenges and problems coming along as a result of that. But those that get on the airbed and just flow with it down the white water ride of the next few years, well, life's going to be an adventure if they see it as an adventure, if they see challenge as an adventure, and treat every challenge as an experience instead of a brick wall that's going to stop them. Exactly. Brick walls only exist when we perceive them to be brick walls. When we perceive them to be made of cardboard, that's what they're made of. We create our own reality. That's why the foundation of the conspiracy is to manipulate our sense of reality.
This illusion at the end.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Pleasure.
David.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to, and we really look forward to invite you to Prague. And
me too. Me too, I can't wait. I've heard so much about the city. People. And you know, when I started out on this journey consciously 20 years ago, if you talked about this, then people just basically laughed at you. Never mind going to countries all over the world like the Czech Republic now. It just didn't happen. But because world events in recent times have shown people more and more obviously that this centralized global police state is real, and they're now seeing its influences in their lives and on the television news, the interest has just exploded. So coming to a new country like the Czech Republic is very encouraging to me, and I'm really looking forward to coming, because I've never been there before.
Prague is historically mystical and esoteric city and an important gate. Have you got any recent information and data of this kind about Prague and the territory of Czech Republic? And will you have the time to see city?
Well, I hope I'll have the time to see the city, but you know, whenever I go anywhere in the world to speak, my prime focus is making sure that I do the best job I can for the people that come. So I do a lot of preparation. In terms of the Czech Republic, in the weeks before I come, I'll be doing a lot of research about the country and that background and how it fits into the global picture. But the way all countries operate is that there is a global network, a global web of secret societies and particular families, and they act like a transnational corporation. Transnational corporation has a headquarters, and in each country it has its subsidiary companies who all operate in line with the dictated agenda and policy of the center. Well, this network has a center, and it's in Europe, places like London and Paris and Berlin, etc., Switzerland. And in each country, and the Czech Republic will be no different, there is a network of secret societies that are Afghanistan at the time, which was controlled by the Soviet Union. And what he says openly now is that it was done to try to entice the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan, as they did eventually, to protect their government from the freedom fighters that Brzezinski had trained and funded. What happened then is that during that Russian occupation or Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, 1 million Afghans died, but Brzezinski said he did it because he wanted to give the Soviet Union, quote, their Vietnam, and destroy another superpower. However, what happened was these freedom fighters then became known as the Mujahideen, who then became known as the Taliban. And now we've got Barack Obama sending tens of thousands more troops into Afghanistan to, quote, fight the Taliban, which were in effect created by his mentor, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Brzezinski and Soros have worked together on these color revolutions, etc., like the Velvet Revolution, in Eastern Europe. It's all a scam. And you know, people say, well, we've got to vote now. Well, there's two forms of control. There's a control that you can see, communism, fascism, and although people are controlled that way, at least they know where they stand. They're in a controlled situation and they can basically see the controllers. The greatest form of enslavement is an enslavement that you cannot see. It's like a prison without the bars. If you've got in a prison, you've got bars around you, you know you've got a situation you need to get out of. If you can't see the bars, you'll just sit there forever in the prison and do nothing about it, because people do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. And what's happened with these revolutions in Eastern Europe is that they have exchanged a dictatorship and a tyranny that they can see for a dictatorship and a tyranny that masquerades as freedom and democracy. And what people need to realize is that
Dear David, you are coming to give an all-day presentation in Prague this September. It might be your first time at the past Eastern Communist bloc. Your first book, Only Infinite Love is the Truth, Everything Else is Illusion, is about to be published at the end of August. What are your feelings about that?
Well, I'm delighted about the book going into your language and also coming across to speak, because it's another indication of how far the understanding is now getting across the world that the world and our lives are very different to what we thought they were before. We look at governments and various other political organizations, and we think that they are running our lives and they are doing it because we have elected them. But the truth is that all the countries are controlled by the same global network of a group of interbreeding families that go back to the ancient world and have been embarked on a process of the constant centralization of power in the world, century after century after century, where we've moved from a tribal situation where people in the tribe decided what happened in the tribe, then the tribes were brought together, lots of tribes under things called nations. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes, and now we're into this very much in Europe, into this next stage, which is bringing the nations together and putting them into this European Union fascist dictatorship, because that's what it is, where a few people, actually not even elected politicians but bureaucrats appointed, are dictating to all the nations of Europe. So you see the constant incessant centralization of power, and this is important because if the few are going to control the many more and more powerfully, they have to keep centralizing decision making so that fewer and fewer people are making the decisions and dictating to the lives of more and more centers, these power centers that exist all over the world, and other people are attracted to the higher level of it, but it still pulls the same people into the same location. In terms of the Velvet Revolution, the so-called color revolutions and velvet revolutions whether it be the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and the Rose Revolution in Georgia, they all take the same pattern, and it's orchestrated by a network involving the American financier and the major financier of Barack Obama, a man called George Soros. And he has a series of trusts and other groupings that form a network, and he has got, with the rest of the cabal, this, again, blueprint for bringing about people's revolutions. And what you do is you manipulate the people to protest against a regime you want to remove. And the people then bring an end to that regime, and they think that people power has ruled, people's power has come out on top. But what happens is, at the end of all of them, is the Soros guy, the cabal guy, ends up in power. And this has happened all over the place. That guy, what's his name, Saakashvili in Georgia, he was or is a front man for the Soros network, and another man called Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is the key mentor over decades of Barack Obama. And Brzezinski was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, and he has openly admitted in a Paris magazine that when he was national security advisor towards the end of the 70s, he funded and trained, quote, freedom fighters in Afghanistan to cause trouble and dissent and violence for the government in Kabul, Afghanistan, Kabul, are like a subsidiary company to that center, that spider in the web that I talk about. And so those ruling major business political families in the Czech Republic will be working through the Czech Republic's secret society network to impose on the Czech people the global policy which is being imposed by other similar networks in all the other countries. So, you know, over the last 20 years I've been to 50 countries researching this, and again and again I see what I call the blueprint, where the same structure exists in every country to impose the same global agenda on every country. Sometimes even the laws are worded the same, never mind justified by the same excuses. So the Czech Republic will be, because every other country is, a subsidiary kind of company of the global network. And I know now, when I come to the Czech Republic, I'll find exactly the same blueprint I find everywhere else, because I find them everywhere. There's no example where I've not found it.
Well, Prague and Czech leaders play a key role in the global conspiracy as well. It was so obvious in called Velvet Revolution at 1989. For instance, the actions of adored anti-communist leader Václav Havel, or Affair Ministry Karl von Schwarzenberg, should be the descender of mythic Dracula. But the Czechs actually believe in him so much. It's funny, isn't it? Do you agree that the highest light and deepest darkness still work together at one place?
Well, I think what you call the highest light and the deepest darkness exist together in every place. And the more powerful energetically a place is, the more the two are attracted to it, because the manipulators, what you call the dark level of people and whatever, they're attracted to the lower frequencies of this power